Hello, and welcome back to Suzerain. And in today's episode, I'm about to sneeze immediately. I feel it coming on. but we are going to Whole Sword, and we have a few things to do. We got a security briefing, but first, I think let's have a dinner at home with our family. After a long day at the palace, I need to sneeze, but it will come out right now. Okay, I was finally home. I thanked Serge, and thank you, Serge, and walked through the front gates, nodding at the two guards as I went by. Even as I turned the doorknob, I could hear Deanna rushing down the stairs to greet me. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in front of me with expectant eyes. "Papa, you're home!" "There's my beautiful princess." I lifted Deanna up and hugged her while trying to get the keys in the tray next to the entrance. She was growing fast. Lifting her up was no longer as easy as it once was. "How was school?" "Boring. I liked my old school better." I put her down and her expression turned serious. "Papa, are the bad men gone?" "It was only one bad man, Deanna, and yes, he's gone now." "Okay, Papa." Deanna dashed down the hallway. "Papa, Mama's here." Monica appeared next to the kitchen door. She was wearing an apron and holding a spatula in her hand. "Deanna, what did I tell you? No running in the house." "Yes, Mama." Monica approached me and kissed me on the cheek. A tantalizing smell wafted from the kitchen behind her. "How was your day, dear?" "Terrific! I finally got to do some grocery shopping, just like the old times, and I'm making your favorite." "You mean..." "Yes, Lorsha." Lorsha was a Latvian specialty, usually reserved for special occasions. A rich seafood stew with heaty garlic and a paprika kick was absolutely my favorite dish, especially paired with cabbage, a potent unfiltered wine from Bergia. It's my lucky day. What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just wanted to cheer everyone up a bit." Her smile faded, and she lowered her voice so that Deanna wouldn't hear. "Especially after what happened at the ball. I'm worried, Anton, for you, for the children, and for the country." Deanna appeared next to us. "Mama." "Yes, sweetheart?" "I'm hungry." "We'll eat in just a minute. Will you help me set the table? Anton, can you tell Frank to come down for dinner? He's been sulking in his room all day." Monica started taking out the plates while I headed upstairs to fetch my son. Loud rock and roll music echoed down. Apparently that's just repeating over and over. It's a very bad song. Echoed down the hallway from his room. I caught a faint hint of cigarette smoke. There was no response. There was still no response. The stereo in Frank's room clicked off. All right. He unlocked and opened the door. "What do you want?" "Food is ready." "Dinner's ready." "Great, I'm starving." Frank headed downstairs to the dining room, and I followed after. The table was prepared, and Monica was ladling food onto the plates. "Come on, have a seat. It won't be tasty if it's cold." As we started eating, the room went quiet. Monica's cooking was delicious as ever, but I have the feeling that wasn't the reason nobody spoke. Monica was the first to break the silence. "Say, did you know they were refurbishing that grocery store? I don't know if you remember the owner. He's been there every day for the past 30 years. Can you imagine doing the same job for so long? What if you were president for 20 years, for example?" "I don't want this country to suffer under another soul." "Agreed. That must never happen again. Anyway, the grocer really is a nice person. He threw in some extra vegetables with my..." Frank suddenly slammed his hands on the table, rattling the plates. Monica and Deanna and I stared at him. "So this is how it's gonna be. We're just gonna sit here like nothing happened. Dad, you could have been killed. Mom could have been killed. Any of us could have been killed. Or any of us could have died. Deanna's lower lip started trembling. Monica put her hand on Frank's shoulder. And what would you have us do? I don't know. Talk about it, maybe? Frank got up from his seat. Fine, let's talk about it. Sit down. Frank took a seat again, scowling. I know it was a close call, but everything is under control. How? How is it under control? It was a rogue shooter. We were not even the target. But what if we were? Frank, listen to your father. If your father says we don't need to worry, then we don't need to worry. You have to trust him. Monica turned to me. We all have to trust each other. Things calmed down a bit at the table. We finished our food in silence. Frank got up and retreated back to his room. Monica lifted Deanna up and plopped her in front of the living room TV before returning to the table. She sat down across from me. I think I undid the sneeze I need to do because I no longer even feel like I need to sneeze. It just really needed to and then just went away. Anton, he's still young. That's what worries me. I made plenty of rash decisions when I was his age. You make plenty of rash decisions now, too. Frank's not the only one who's scared, Anton. I worry too, Monica. Things might escalate. She got up, stood behind me, and massaged my shoulders for a moment, before leaving me alone in the diving room. I sat alone at the table, and drained my glass of beverages. Had I been lying to Frank and Deanna? Was the threat to my family truly over? Time would tell. Time certainly will tell. Okay, let's go way over here, I guess. Cortana Security Pact. CSP faction spotlights workers' rights in report. Drawing internal attention in the pressing issues of labor conditions, a faction within the Cortana Security Pact, CSP, has released an insightful report on workers' rights within its member nations. As the CSP, consistently primarily of planned economies, grapples with the growing capitalist influence of Arcacia and ATO, this report underscores the need for robust labor protections in the world. The document provides a thorough analysis of workers' rights and labor conditions within the CSP member nations spanning several continents. It asserts that these nations surpass the global standards, with an average minimum wage 45% higher and industrial sector unionization rate an impressive 95%. However, it also calls for action on issues such as greater gender wage gap, averaging 12% within CSP nations. The report concludes by advocating the broader enforcement of rigorous labor laws embodying the CSP's commitment to social and political justice. The CSP's stance on workers' rights offers a strong counter-narrative to the ATO's capitalist orientations, emphasizing the alliance's commitment to socio-economic equity. Republic of Morella. In the wake of Bernard's Circus' timely passing, President Alma Sutton of Morella conveyed a heartfelt condolences of the people of Swordland. The leader recognized Circus as an influential poet and advocate for Melevist ideas, eliminating his loss as a blow to the literacy and political world. She called for the memorization of Circus' contribution to social discourse and reaffirmed Morella's commitment to the ideals he espoused. Okay. And what we got on the news is going on. Protests across Swordland. Protests erupted around Swordland after the death of Bernard Circus, many of which started peaceful, but soon turned violent. Protesters with red youth flags were seen in most central cities around Swordland, carrying out violent riots and organizing protests that disrupted much vital services from being delivered to the Swordish people. Protesters held sit-ins, which were broken up by riot police with tear gas and water cannons in the regions of Bergia, England, and Gurney. Thousands of people poured into the Republic Avenue in Lochevin and Sol Square in Holsword. In response to the Young Sword's attacks, similar protests around Swordland soon turned violent riots. Protest in Gruney. Protests are taking place throughout the Gruni region in response to the assassination of Bernard Circus. The protesters raised their concerns about the young swords, the increased cost of living, and the inequality prevalent in the country. Large rallies have been organized in the city centers of Benfi and Boren, and a large conglomerate of Red Youth members have organized sit-ins and protests aimed at hampering public transport in the city of Volgan, which brought the city to a standstill for a few hours before riot police came to disperse large groups of protesters at transportation nodes. We have political chaos. Man, things seem to be going well. Political violence has surrounded Sordland since yesterday. While officials from the police claim to have the situation under control, protests are turning into riots, and violent attacks are occurring around the country. NFP and Less call for protests. Casardo, Kimner, and the Nationalist Front Party called a rally to condemn the communist influence from United Cortana and called the violent protesters as traitors to Sordland. These malevists are roaming in our streets, conducting violent attacks in disguise as peaceful protesters. We can't let them exploit a man's murder, said Kimner in a press conference. On the other hand, the labor union of Sordland has gathered to condemn nationalist violence in Sordland. The protests gathered crowds of several thousand agitators from both sides in Holsword, and acts of vandalism occurred. Concerning Porton accused Kimner for provoking the public. Young Swords vandalized shops. A group of people with Young Sword flags have vandalized a dozen shops in the trade district of Anrica, specifically targeting Blutish and Agno-Swordish minorities. The shop owners who defended themselves were wounded in the attacks. Local police broke the groups apart. NFP office burned. A group of violent militants have assaulted the NFP headquarters in Morna and committed arson. Firefighters have been called to the scene, where fires raged for hours on end. Several nearby houses burned to the ground before it was brought under control. Radical. Unrest in Sordland. Arvery, yesterday morning, hundreds of nationalists visited a PFJP party office in Arvery after supportive statements of Friends Richter about Bernard Circus. The office was stoned by the aggressive group, and several civilians were wounded in the chaos. Later in the evening, another group of militants fired shots at 5 people who were inside the Communist Party's local office, killing 4. After receiving a gunshot complaint from the neighbors, police arrived at the scene to find 3 wounded and 1 dead. The ambulance was called, but didn't arrive in time to save the wounded. The Jin protesters have gathered to condemn the murder of Bernard Circus, the national stronghold of Jin. Tensions quickly increased when a countermarch of nationalists met the protesters. The 2 groups clashed, and riot police had to intervene to disperse. 23 people, including police officer, were wounded. So yeah, I think things are going pretty well overall. I don't see any problems with the current situation of our nation, you know? Right guys? Right? Nothing's going wrong at all, right? I arrived in front of the doors leading to the Situation Room. Today's security briefing was arranged in 2 parts, starting with internal matters and moving on to external matters after a short break. The Minister of Interior, Lilius Graf, and the Minister of Justice and Law, Nia Morgana, would join us for the first part, the law enforcement briefing. For the second part, the Minister of Defense, Iosif Lencia, would join with a few high-ranking officers, including the Chief of the Armed Forces, Vulcan Kruger. Opening the door, Lucian, Nia, and Lillian rose from their seats. Sir? Sir? Please, nodded Lucian. I nodded at Lucian and sat down. Everyone in the room sat down except for Lucian. He put on his glasses and went through his documents in front of him. Shortly after, he raised his head to address the attendants. Mr. President, ladies, we will kick off today's meeting with the internal security briefing. I'm assuming everyone had already been over the agenda. We all have busy schedules, so without further ado, I will jump into our first topic. As we feared, the political atmosphere has worsened. The reports around the country indicate that tensions are rising as we feared. What is the status of the Bernard Circus investigation? I have received news this morning that the investigation into the murder of Bernard Circus has concluded. Great news. I am eager to hear about the details. After further investigations and testimonies, we have confirmed the motive and also the events leading up to the shooting. A few days prior, members of the Red Youth initiated a violent attack on Young Sword's local leader in Jin. We believe the Young Swords then called revenge, leading to the death of Mr. Circus. Since he often spoke against the young swords and national sentiments in the assembly, he was a big target, not to mention his radical communist views. Political violence needs to stop now. Yes, we've kept it at bay for so long, but it seems there are now new triggers. Lilius handed over the report and pointed at a highlighted section in the document. The investigation revealed a troubling fact. The funding sources of the Red Youth have a clear link to the United Cortana. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? Yes, we have found the cash trail. Several Red Youth members with ties to United Cortana have been detained, and information extracted from them points to a preparation for a communist uprising in Swordland. It isn't unusual for the superpowers to influence other nations, but I think this is a case a little far-fetched. The left lacks popular support in Swordland. Nia eagerly lifted her head, and I motioned for her to speak. I went over the report in detail. It would be wrong to jump to conclusions about a clear foreign interference yet. United Cortana has humanitarian and cultural ties with many countries, including Swordland. I also don't want to jump to conclusions immediately. We couldn't create a crisis with them. Nearly 3 decades ago, they funded General Ricard and tried to establish a communist dictatorship in our country. If it was not for Colonial Soul, we would have seen the real crisis. She took a sip from her glass of water and continued. Our police chief, Carl Grieser, has linked the funding channel to United Cortana, consultant in Brunfi. As we all know, the enemies of Swordland are many, but we also have threats inside the country. We need to remain vigilant, as a people and a nation. If we give up essential freedoms to purchase temporary security, we deserve neither freedoms nor security. This is debatable, but yes, we know more security and surveillance caused to this country under President Sol. Let's not forget that President Sol, God bless him, brought stability after a long period of bloodshed and chaos. But moving on, our highest internal threat comes from the estimated 20,000-strong Blutish Freedom Front, led by President Delwyn Arge. They are a banned political organization, now a militant force that is trying to incite racial violence. Are they supported by our Blutish citizens? To some extent. Luckily, they couldn't attract a wide audience of Bloods, but they could potentially attract thousands if anti-Bloodish sentiment spreads in Swordland again. Laius pointed to page 3 in the report. Our intelligence well then we'll just not do bad things to Bloodish people. Simple as that. Boom. Done. Okay, moving on. Our intelligence intercepted 2 crates filled with weapons close to Rumburg border. They are filled with military-grade Ka-74s. We expect that more have been smuggled in. A group of Bloods were caught with these guns at a checkpoint not too far away. The governor of Bergia, Felix Braun, is already taking the necessary measures to counter the threat. In what way? Rumburg has been acting aggressively in the region for a long time. I'm not surprised that they would attempt to weaponize the Blutish people against us. This is worrying. Very worrying. We need to keep level-headed with the Rumburg. They are looking for reason to take action. They will play dirty while we play nice. It is a battle we will lose. This is grave news. We must be careful not to stoke the fires of anti-Blutish sentiment. Unfortunately, Governor Braun is directly causing the tension to increase with his increasingly anti-Blutish stance. I must remind you, Governor Braun is directly responsible for the arrest of Delwyn Arge, the previous leader of the BFF. It's true that his methods can be extreme at times, but it was his policies that kept the region peaceful over the last decade. He is misusing the powers given to him by a Turcan soul. The insane authority of the governor is surely a root cause. It would be very difficult to revoke the special status of Bergia under the current circumstances, Miss Morgana. The presidents no longer have the authority Turcan soul enjoyed. For now, yes, but with enough justification for it, it would be possible. Anyways, we will be discussing this at a later time. Tell me more about the special zone. As you know, Bergia was given a special status by Turk and Seoul after the full-scale uprising by the BFF against the Swedish government in 1935. Those couple years were disastrous for Bergia Delwyn, Arge, and the BFF declared war on us, openly attacked our people, and occupied entire cities. It was a massive uprising, but I'd like to point out, the longest time they were in control of a city was 2 weeks. I wouldn't call that an occupation. Despite the arrests of Delwyn, Arge in 1944 and the BFF ceasing its activities, the special status of the regions were never revoked. Today, the special zone of Bergia gives the governor insane amounts of authority. It was in trouble with the law before, but for not following the central government's authority. Unfortunately, Bergia also has its own police forces directly commanded by Governor Broad. They are not part of my ministry and only cooperate when they are forced to do so. This is a problem. Even though our special forces have the authority to serve in Bergia, the special zone leaves the security of Bergia mostly in the hands of the governor. That leaves my hands tied. The discrimination Bergia suffers is maddening. We should find a way to revoke the special status of Bergia, one way or another. I will do my best, Mr. President. Nia gestures at Lilias. What is the second most important threat? It is the gang violence that is threatening Nargis and Angland regions. Two prominent organized crime families are at war, and the potential for bloodshed is real. Which two crime families? One is known as Corinne, and the other is Skinner Cartel. They used to be allies until the recent disagreement. Both are active in the cities of Narbil and Estord. Lilias, I trust that you can handle them. I am doing my best, sir. Lilias Graff sighed deeply. I shall be honest with you. Our current capabilities, we may not be able to prevent the further arming of separatists while maintaining order in Bergia, Nargis, and England. If the law enforcement budget is increased, I can't be fully responsible for what happens. Our police units are spread thin as it is. You will do your job whatever happens. Don't come to me with excuses. My job is to keep you fully informed, and this is the reality. My experience and expertise is keeping our country safe from violent thugs can only go so far. I wish you would stop using the word thugs, Lilias. The real problem is corruption, which is fueling the gang violence and is very likely the reason why these weapons were smuggled in. A higher budget could help us in that. Valid points. Corruption is the root of all evil, after all. We can look into corruption once the weapons have been found and the gangs have been beaten. Just like previous administrations kicking the can down the road, this was destroying our institutions. Lilias and Nia were openly scowling at each other. Lilias turned back to her notes. Well, this concludes the topics for the internal portion. Thank you for the updates, Miss Graff, Miss Morgana. Thank you for the overview. Have a good day. Until next time. The two ministers left the room. We took a short break before continuing to the second part. Upon invitations, Iosif Lancia, along with 3 high-ranking officials from Ministry of Defense, walked into the room. One of the men was none other than General Kruger, the chief of the armed forces. Iosif made his way towards the table while the others stood by the door. Mr. President. Iosif, welcome. I brought General Kruger with me due to the escalation on our borders. General Kruger stepped forward and saluted. He had a strong jaw of sharp cheekbones. His tall structure, uniform, and medals, combined with his deep, intense stare, made him look threatening. He was in his 70s, yet he had a bulky body that was the result of his commando trainings. Not only was he the second most decorated officer in Swordland, he was also the longest serving. I salute him. He smiled at the jester and bowed his head in respect. Iosif tapped his foot immediately. He seemed uneasy with the presence of another high-ranking officer in the room. Gentlemen, thank you for coming to this significant gathering. Let's begin. Iosif and Vulcan took their seats at the table, while the rest of the officers stood by the door. Mr. President, the situation at the western and northern borders toward Rimburg is very tense. We are observing deployment of divisions closer to our borders. Rumburg has been acting increasingly expansionist in the past decade, and also interfered at Agnonia, but now they have turned their sights on us. I trust the capabilities of our armed forces to handle any threats. I can assure you of our capabilities, but we don't have unlimited resources. It seems they want to increase the pressure, both externally and internally. Mr. President, if I may. Please, General. The picture is becoming clearer. The latest information from the interior about the weapon caches, and now there is an active military buildup close to our borders. The entire potential situation was analyzed by our general staff, and our prediction is a future territorial incursion by Rumberg. I have complete trust in the general staff. We will not let you down, Mr. President. The general staff is composed of the smartest military individuals. I require an increase in the military budget to enlist more soldiers. Only then we can stand strong against our enemies. The enlarged armed forces will hold them at bay. Vulcan is right. We do need an increase in the military budget, although we don't see eye to eye on exactly how to spend the budget. That much we agree on. I have my concerns about Rumberg, too. We need strong allies to withstand such a superior power. They are our nemesis. That is an understatement. Times are changing and war is coming, Mr. President. Whether we like it or not, we must be prepared. During the election, you said nothing about focusing our military. I asked you to reconsider and to increase the military budget. The future and safety of Suzerain is in our hand. I am a man of my word, Iosif. That is a valuable trait, Mr. President. However, it will not help when the enemy armies are invading our cities. Our forces would crumble under a decrease, and Rumberg would be much more compelled to exploit our weakness. Our country hasn't fallen to any invading force for 200 years. You cannot let it happen, Mr. President. We should find regional allies like Vaxlan or Lesbia to deter Rumberg. There are several options on the table. Rumberg wouldn't attack any nationality with a superpower. One shudders at the sacrifices that would require us to make. Yes, but what is the difference, losing your independence to one or the other? Everyone fell silent when a soldier entered the room, let Iosif Lancia know that a call had come through from the military. Excuse me, Mr. President. I left the room to answer. A few minutes later, he entered the room again. His expression had changed. Mr. President, there has been a Rumbergian military activity close to the Narbel border. I just spoke with the local commander. Vulcan, we should go to the ministry and get further updates from our branches. Understood. Raising military readiness is the first call on the actions. If there's truly an extraordinary attempt, we will relay it to you immediately and wait for further orders, Mr. President. Your service is appreciated, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. President. You shall be updated if the situation escalates. Hail, Swordland! Hail! They saluted and left the room. Rumberg was already testing us, and the reports from the interior indicate interference inside our borders. Communist, nationalist, Bluish rebels, Rumberg expansion. What was next? Suzerain had always been a key piece in the chessboard rivalry between Arcadia and United Quintana, but in recent years there was no such aggression from Rumberg. Not at these levels, at least. All it takes is one tiny spark to start the flames of war. The phone rang. Rumberg had decided to close their consulate in Lachavin. Seems like things are going pretty dang well. I think everything's gonna be just okay. So yeah, I think everything's fine, everything's gonna be okay, and nothing could ever go wrong. So I think this is a good time to go ahead and end this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And as always, peace.